Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And on today's episode, we have a very special guest. He is a New York Times bestselling author and publisher. His work includes the Tristan Strong series. He's also been an editor on the New York Times bestselling anthology Black Boy Joy. He's also has an imprint, Freedom Fire. He does a lot of stuff. Specific to this podcast, he is the most recent author in the Star Wars galaxy on the book The Last Order. We're so happy to have him. Kwame Mbalia, welcome to Friends of the Force.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to talk with you all.
We're just so happy to have you here and talk about your career and getting to delve back into a galaxy far, far away. So first off, how does it feel to have The Last Order out on bookshelves? It's been a couple of weeks now since the release.
It's been a project of three parts, an excitement of three parts. It's very much giving a Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss introduction. But yes, it was an excitement of three parts because you get the excitement, of course, of being able to actually write the book. When you get that news, like, yeah, we're gonna do a Star Wars book. Like, yeah, all right, perfect. I've always wanted to. The sky is the limit, the galaxy is the limit. Like, there are so many ideas. I can't wait, right? And then you write the book and you turn the book in and you launch the book, and the build up to it has been wonderful. The fans have been wonderful. The team has been wonderful. And so it was an incredible launch, journeying to New York Comic Con, doing panels. It was, fantastic. But then you also have the reception, the way the readers have enjoyed the book. And listen, like, your reading experience is your own. Once the book is out, once I've turned it in, I don't have any more control over how readers perceive it, whether they enjoy it or not, wish it was better. But the feedback and the way that people have reacted towards it has been just incredibly invigorating, both for me as a Star Wars fan and me as a writer in general. It's like, all right, yeah, okay, I can tell a good story or two. That's wonderful. You always worry, every writer worries that their previous project was their last good one, and can we replicate the success of just turning in a well-received book? And thankfully that was the case for this go round. So I'm really, really happy about that.
And we're really happy to add to the chorus of people who have enjoyed this book and gotten a lot out of it. Yes. And we're so excited to be talking to you today about it. And but before we kind of jump into all the details of the book, just want to talk about Star Wars broadly, I guess. And when did Star Wars first come into your life? And what is your history as a fan of Star Wars?
Every time someone asks this question, I immediately leap towards like those old original movie posters with Luke with the lightsaber raised to the sky, Leia on one side, Vader's helmet looming ominously in the background. And I remember seeing that poster in Blockbuster Video, ye old purveyors of movies of the olden days, right? And I just remember seeing them, and this is when the Blockbuster Video was like attached to a grocery store. So you would go into the store and then go into the Blockbuster Video. And I just remember staring at the poster like, what is that? What is that? And then flash forward, every holiday season, somewhere around Thanksgiving, all, TNT, TBS, they would start running marathons of movies, whether it's Bond or whatever, and I remember watching the original trilogy, from like 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning, back to back to back. And just every time it came on, I would watch it. I've been a Star Wars fan for a while, so much so that I'm a big library kid. I read a lot of books. Obviously, I'm a writer. And I remember some of the old, now EU, the Extended Universe books. For some reason, the only one that I can remember, like, I remember Timothy Zahn did a bunch, but the only one that immediately leaps to mind are like the Death Troopers, like the zombie, with Han and Chewie when they encounter zombie stormtroopers. That's the one that always leaps to mind. But yeah, I remember just reading all of the books, watching the movies when they came out. couldn't afford a movie ticket, but I would go to the movie theater and sit in the pod racer arcade and just pretend like I was a part or in the movie. So Star Wars has been a part of my life for a very, very long time as a fan. I'm doing this whole podcast right now. I'm holding this because it was in my chair. My family knows how much of a Star Wars fan I am. And I have a Star Wars advent calendar that they put in my seat. And I'm like, how, and it's like there's only 24 pieces, but I'm like, I could probably open this now and just do like one per every 3 or 4 days and just to, get the experience. So everyone knows. Everyone in my family knows, like, daddy loves Star Wars. Let's let him have his moment. Let me have my moment. Yes, you're going to have your moment. There you go.
I agree. We should all be having our moments as Star Wars fans, and it's my family definitely knows too. Like she's the Star Wars one. Give her the Star Wars puzzles. Give her the Star Wars books, and I love that your family got you the advent calendar.
It's very easy to shop for me.
It comes with the territory. You write Star Wars books. We host a Star Wars podcast talking about Star Wars books. We just love Star Wars. It's just in our DNA at this point. But speaking of DNA, you were formerly a pharmaceutical metrologist, which that's a new to us job. We had to look that one up. Thank you for the FAQ on your website. It definitely helped. Super interesting. But what led you to pivot to a career in writing, and like what have you learned about yourself in that process of changing careers and discovering this creative side of yourself and through your voice?
Well, this is a great thing that I love to tell, young people when I'm doing school visits. I just did, 2 school visits today. And I always talk about how I was a scientist first, and writing was always a hobby, something I did to like kind of figure myself out, deal with complicated emotions. Um, I was always a writer, bits and pieces, short stories, fits and starts of, novels, comics and poetry. I've always done a little bit of writing. And so it's nothing new for me to try and attempt a story. What is new is actually seeing it all the way through to completion and not being bored because, a plague of the early writer is the new shiny story that comes along that distracts you, and having the discipline to stick with the story that you started and seeing it through. So I've been writing since I was in, I don't know, third, fourth grade. I have a picture right here. Where What year was this? It's the first annual Black History essay contest run by the Milwaukee Courier in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I grew up. Um, there are there are jerry curls, um, wood paneling. So this is old. This is it's got to be fourth or fifth grade, and I won first place. Like I've always been a writer. What's new is just doing it for other people. I was always writing for myself, but publishing it for someone else to read, that's only been the last 6 7 years, and hopefully some you know fifth grader just perked up, his antenna went up, he's like 6 7. But it's only been like 6 or 7 years since I've been published that I've been doing this professionally.
Yeah, and this is not your first time writing Star Wars either. You're returning after from a certain point of view contribution back in 2023. So what was it like to return to the galaxy far, far away? And can you take us through, your day-to-day in writing and crafting the plot for The Last Order?
I mean, one of the students today asked me, for advice, and my advice to them was like, we should all be writing more short stories. Short stories are how um, writers practice, how they hone their skills, tackling different POV, whether it's third person versus first person, different genres from mystery to thriller to horror to sci-fi. Um, and so being able to sort of sharpen my Star Wars skills by writing the short story Fortuna Favors the Bold and the From a Certain Point of View anthology was really, really, really helpful, because it allowed me to sort of like shake off the dust, get into the rhythm of writing within the Star Wars galaxy, which has their own terminology, their own way of doing things, of talking about things. For the longest time, I would say pistol, 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 and it's blaster. You got to say blaster. And I would get the copy edits, and it's like, haha, you got to say blaster, And so it got me into shape. It's conditioning, for the real thing. Like you're training for a marathon. You do some light jogs, you do some sprints, you do some stretches. You don't just hop out and do, the 26.2 miles right away. So I'm really, really grateful that I had that opportunity to do the short story. My process for writing The Last Order was, who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. I used to say I had a process. Just the very fact of me getting to this podcast here today indicates that there is nothing regular about my process. I fully intended to do some writing today, and nothing happened, from emergency power lines being down to household emergencies. I got to call a repair guy, getting dinner situated, being a parent, there is no regular writing routine. What I can say is, like, with regards to, like, the structure of the book, there are sort of three POVs. You have the current timeline with our main character Koi, and then we have Finn and Jannah and a sort of historical timeline. We jump back into the past, alternating between their point of views. And so at the very beginning, I started trying to write the book the way that a reader would read it, where we're switching from POV to POV. And I very quickly realized that that was not going to work. And so what I did is I wrote, I think I finished Finn's POV in the past, and then did Jannah's, and then finished up Koi's so that we could wrap everything up. And then we went back and we started moving chapters around based off of flow, pacing, and sort of what made sense in terms of pushing the reader forward. Because it's not just okay, now we have a Koi, now we have a Finn, now we have a Jannah, and then rinse and repeat. No, it's what the novel demanded, what the rhythm of the story demanded. And sometimes that meant you might go Finn, Jannah, Jannah, Finn, and then have a Koi. Other times it might have been the opposite or something totally different. So it was a interesting brain breaking process, but at the end of it, I think we managed to get it right.
What's neat about it too is that there are, three separate stories that are then tied together thematically in Koi Story, which is great. But it makes sense when you say it, like, it makes sense that you would write kind of one perspective all together and then build it back out, and then kind of, it's like a puzzle done in three kind of parts and shift it around.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's really exciting with this book too, because we're getting some of our first glimpses into life after the Rise of Skywalker, which that's super cool that you get to pull back the curtain there. And that opening scene on Agent Gloss, where we get Poe and Finn and Lando and Jannah, and I think Finn and Poe are sipping some drinks together and laughing about how bad it tastes. And I was listening to the audiobook, and it made me giggle, and it made me remember how much I love these characters, and it felt like a homecoming after 6 years since that movie had come out. So what was it like to reunite this cast of characters in a yet to be written future that's still unfolding before our eyes?
It was fun. It took a little bit. I think Poe was the most difficult for me to kind of like get into, um, emulate that voice that we're so familiar with, that we've grown to love. Finn was easy. 3PO was incredibly easy. I think I just have a very snarky, 3PO mentality. Um, yeah, so Poe was probably the more difficult to kind of get into the headspace of, how would he react? What would he say here? But it was fun having them engage, and some of my favorite parts of the movies were those dynamics of the characters interacting with each other, just in like downbeats, not in, well, moments of action or tension or conflict, but just those moments in between where they can sort of exhale, and just sort of the camaraderie that exists between them. Like, those are some of my favorite parts of stories in general, but especially with these, Star Wars characters. So it was really fun to, reassemble them, reassemble the cast, kind of pick up sort of right where we were, where we left off, and just throw another wrench into the plans.
Yeah, the downbeat moments. You're so right. I think of Poe going, "Is that my jacket? Looks good on you," in The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
that's like one of my favorite moments in the film, because it says so much about that dynamic with so few words. But the mundanity of life in the Resistance, I think, is the most fun, some of the most fun things to explore in Star Wars, specifically the sequel trilogy. And even in like the originals, like life in the Rebellion. It's why I love Andor, is because it's 2 seasons of building a rebellion, and a lot of it is mundane, but some of it is so thrilling.
Yeah, and as a writer, I think I'm always fascinated with characters, and the necessity to make the reader believe that this is a fully fleshed out world, that things are happening off the page even as we are moving on the page. And so, I was the type of person that always wondered, like, in the superhero movies, what is the random person doing, down the block? And they just, like, if I'm locked in, if I've got a deadline, if it's 4 p.m. and I got to turn something in at 4:30, my boss is breathing down my neck. I got my noise canceling headphones on, and there's a boom down the street. I might look up for a second, and then I'm going right back to work. I'm locked in. I'm trying to get these Excel sheets sorted, so that I can turn in my report and not, get a personal improvement plan added to my record, right? Like, I'm focused. So, like, I've always wondered, like, what is the world thinking as these things are happening, right? Our main character Koi, in the present day timeline, he comes from a planet, and his family has a tea farm, and so while he's off rip roaring on this adventure with these heroes, the tea farm still has to be operated. The droids still have to be oiled. The workers still have to harvest the tea. Grandpa still has to test it out to make sure that it's, the right flavor, and steeped the right way, the way that they've been doing for centuries. So, like, I'm fascinated with the things that happen while things are happening. And, writing this story just really gives me the opportunity, as they're moving through space stations, um, as they are, in the downtime. I always mess up the name. Is it Agent Kloss? Did I
Yes.
pronounce it
Yeah.
right? It's so hard being a writer and a reader and not having the pronunciations. You just make up things in your head.
Yeah,
Um,
and oftentimes I'm the reader of the podcast and Sarah is the audiobook person. And so, like, we come
mhm.
back together, we're like, "How was that thing pronounced? Because here's what I thought it was." And
And it's
Sarah's like,
different
"No, no,
every time.
no, different."
And you're just completely off the mark.
Yeah. Star Wars
Yeah,
for you.
so I mean,
Yeah.
like, being able to, like, reassemble the group in, like, the hot sweltering jungle and the hidden resistance base, and things don't magically snap back to normal and go back to being okay once the First Order is defeated. Like, things have to happen. There's still bureaucracy, there's still supplies, and so just being able to wade through and weave in minutia is, like, my favorite part of being an author.
And I think it was so great in this book too to kind of have Coy be this character that brings all our stories together, because he is this everyday person, as a tea farmer with his family, who's pulled into the story. He's very much us on the journey of Star Wars as well. So, why isn't, to you, is an outsider like Coy the right kind of character to drive the present, the quote unquote present day storyline?
Nah, because it's so much more interesting.
Yeah.
Come on, like, I'm a storyteller. Like, it's listen, it is so easy, relatively. It's so relatively easy to tell a story where the reader is the hero, right? Everything is heroic. They have strengths that more than or abilities that are better than the average person. They're stronger than the average person, or they know something more than the average person. I want the average person. That's where it becomes more interesting, because how do they move through the world without these special abilities or powers, right? Um, at this time, both Finn and Jannah, they are respected generals in the resistance. They are, leaders. Poe is like probably the third or fourth, like if not in actual rank, just renown, most important person in the resistance right now, right? And so like they're all talented, they're all incredible. And so one of my favorite things to do is to look at these people through the eyes of someone else, right? Someone who can notice. Because listen, we lie to ourselves all the time. Oh, I can do this. I'm strong. I'm not afraid. I can take on this, right? We tell ourselves that all the time. Well, someone else might notice our hand shake as we move for the throttle, or as trembling as we're trying to pick up something to eat, or when we have a moment to ourselves and our breathing, we're shuddering. It's stilted and stuttering. And so being able to see those heroes through someone else's eyes, as you said, through our eyes, the everyday person, I think it makes it more impactful. Um, but also, I want to say that it's important for Koi to be there to remind us that the everyday person can do something little and be impactful, like to make a difference. You know what I mean? We start off with the book, and he's like, I'm late. I missed it. I missed the Battle of Exegol. It's, why am I here? I might as well go back to the tea farm. No, he still has a role to play. And he finds it by one, just delivering a message, and two, just being like, hey, I have a ship. So you never know when it's your opportunity to step up, stand up, and do something little and yet still powerful.
For all the reasons you listed, he is such an interesting character, and it's not every day you get to make a brand new character in Star Wars. Out of curiosity, where do you pull from to create Koi? Like, do you pull from characters in Star Wars who intrigue you? Do you pull from people you know in your own life, or characters from other stories that you've written in the past? Like, what is the DNA of Koi, and how do you kind of pull that all together? Or where do you draw that inspiration from to create him?
So I've never told anyone this. Originally, Koi was going to be, an alien. He was going to be an alien, and he was going to require, breathing assistance because he was an alien. That's kind of why he has that moisture vap. And so instead of making him an alien, I was like, oh, this is like sort of like having breathing assistance, like for people who have asthma or whatever. But originally he was going to be an alien, and the name I can't find it. The name Koi Tria is like my like I shortened and like separated like the species of an animal that I was going to base the alien off of. Um, so as a scientist and as a biologist, that's what I majored in. A lot of my like when I'm doing sci-fi or fantasy, a lot of my like um different races and species will come from biology, where I'm thinking of, well, how do these people adapt to whatever planet or whatever environmental influences they may have. And I think about it biologically, and I look for animals and creatures that have adapted similarly. And I might look for the genus or the species name and kind of play around with it, because otherwise, that's just like my system, because otherwise you could spend all day trying to come up with something. But this way, at least it feels a little bit organized for me. So I cannot remember. I thought it was a capybara, but I think I might have. Oh wait, did I just find it? Wait a second. Yes. Okay. Yes, it did start from the capybara. I knew I wasn't tripping. So
Heck yeah.
the capybara, um member of the genus. It is more distantly related to the agouti, the chinchilla, and the nutria.
Ah.
And I was like, oh, nutria. So you click on nutria. The nutria, or koi poo, is a herbivorous rodent from South America. Um, and so there you go. The nutria and koi poo. So I take koi and I take tria, flip them, and all of a sudden I have a name.
I love that so much because I feel like Star Wars names really can be anything and everything, and they have to be, different than what we have, the names that we see here. They have to be just slightly different, and that is perfect.
Hmm.
It's so Star Wars. It's such a great way to find a name. I really love that.
Oh, there are lots of some of the names in the book are um I've taken or smushed like friends' names together. Or um one of them is my sister. I just took a letter off. So there are all sorts of people like, hey, I put you in Star Wars. You're in Star Wars. Ah, I'm in Star Wars. It's just great to do that.
I think that is so much fun. And I think that all your friends and loved ones appreciate that too, for sure. That's got to be a cool realization upon reading the book or when you tell them. Another like really important thing I think about this with this book is the story of Finn and Jannah and getting to hear their backstories in this book. And we're approaching very, very soon the 10th anniversary of The Force Awakens. And thinking back, Finn was the first character that was introduced in the sequel trilogy's promotional campaign, which, marked a significant moment for the franchise. With this being his first kind of POV novel where we're getting more of his backstory beyond there was a novel right before The Force Awakens came out as well. And given your work as an author and publisher, highlighting stories of Black resilience and joy, what did it mean to you to explore Finn and Jannah's journeys in this book?
It was a time. It was fun. Because a lot of it you have to remember. There's a couple things you got to remember. One, they're teenagers. Um, and two, um, they are teenagers fighting for and on behalf of, a an oppressive, organization that is determined to rule everything, right? And so they have been um conditioned and trained to follow these orders on behalf of this group. And throughout this book, there are moments where you can see them sort of not even by themselves, but sometimes with the assistance of others, sort of deprogramming themselves, right? Like it's almost like peeling off an onion skin layer by layer. You see them shedding some of that programming and to start to think for themselves, right? And so both Finn and Jannah, it was so important because like this is the audience that I write for. I did 2 school visits today in areas of where I live in North Carolina, where there aren't any independent bookstores. There's a singular Barnes and Noble, maybe 30, 45 minutes away. And we are struggling to improve the selection that libraries have to offer. And so being able to that's one reason why I love the cover. It is such a to me it is such a gorgeous and it's a hopeful cover. Like you see them with their helmets off, but you have these flowers that are very important in the story that are sort of framing them, growing around them. It feels different to me. It feels like a different Star Wars cover. Um, and it feels like them with their helmet off. It's like they're starting to realize that maybe they should be doing something different. You see, like they're starting to deprogram and being able to show Finn, like I've always had that connection with Finn and, the backlash that has faced every, marginalized character within the Star Wars universe since the beginning of time. Being able to focus on them, highlight them, and have people realize, like, I really like this story. I really resonate with them. That's important. It's really really important. And again, it just shows that everybody needs their story told at some point, and it's important for those people, for that reader who resonates with those characters, it's important for that story to be told because they see themselves in that book.
I'm so happy we got to explore them further, and I totally agree on the cover. I think when the cover got revealed, a lot of Star Wars online community was like buzzing with it because it just looked so unique compared to what we've gotten
Hmm.
before. And I think Finn and Jannah left a lot on the table with the sequel trilogy to continue exploring because like we only got those snippets of Jannah right at the end, and I'm like, I need more Jannah, and I need more Finn. And I feel like this book was the answer to what I was feeling, as well as like many other fans, and especially fans who saw themselves through these two characters. And I would love to know from you as you got to dive deeper into to them and like what's at their core, both within and outside of the First Order. Like, what do you like the most about each of these characters? And like, what were some of those aspects of them that were important to dive into?
Well, for Finn, Finn obviously it's his for me it's his humor. I think Finn throughout the movie has had this really unintentional, dry at times, innocent humor. You know, um, him talking with Ray. Do you have a boyfriend? As they're interacting, but even more so, excuse me, even more so as there's a moment, in The Force Awakens where he is talking with Maz, and that's I believe at his core, at least that is the core for this story of Finn, is when he's talking with Maz and he tells her, "You have no idea what I'm capable of," right? And I'm like, that means something. Something has happened. He has dealt with something, and so that becomes the kernel that we then build off of for the story. What has happened? We don't know what he's capable of, and we read through this part of his past, and we discover, what he's been through, what he's overcome, and the people that he has lost along the way and parts of himself that he has lost along the way, right? And then I'll be perfectly honest with you. I loved working with Jannah because again, we get so little of Jannah, right? She comes at the very last movie. She has, just a few parts or whatever. We learn a little bit about her. I loved working with Jannah because she being able to write her story, one being a squad leader, being able to show how she became a leader, her leadership abilities, talking about those moments in her past that she still thinks about. Like the stormtroopers for a very long time have been almost like the butt of the Star Wars joke. Oh, they can't fire. They're dying all the time, right? And so being able to explore, Jannah's past and what they've been asked to do as troopers, her training with Phasma, her promotion to leadership, how her squad looks up to her. Like it was a privilege to be able to work with her character and sort of really just establish like she's just a total badass. Like she is really, really good. And I want people to know that she is really, really good. Like it is my opinion that Jannah should get more um screen time, novel time, comic time. Like I would, even if I don't write it, I would love to get more just like Jannah on missions, more Jannah um rebelling because she's, being able to write her like she's amazing. Trained with Phasma, special missions, like we still don't like this was in the Force Awakens, that is Finn's first mission, right? And so we had to make sure, and the story group wanted me to make sure that I kept that in mind, that is technically Finn's first mission. So what has to happen in the book is it has to be something unsanctioned, something off the books, a training, an escort, right? Not the case for Jannah. we don't know how many missions Jannah has gone on. We don't know what she's done. We don't know what she's accomplished. She is really um, just a real, like a dark operator. Like we have no idea what else she is capable of. And I would just love to see someone explore that more. Like there's no reason that we can't have more Jannah spinoffs because we haven't really reached or been told what the constraints are on her life and on her story.
Right. Yeah. I think I agree with you on everything that you said about these characters and how wonderful they are. And I think what came across for me most in the story, especially about Jannah, was her loyalty to the people around her and how she continuously looked out for them, even when leadership was ready to discard them. And I
Hmm.
thought that said so much about her. And it made me look back at her introduction in The Rise of Skywalker and, be that much more fond of her. Like I already liked her immediately. I already thought she was really cool. But kind of getting this backstory and kind of learning how she got to that place was awesome. And I agree with you. More Jannah, it has to be in our future. We're in an unwritten sequel time frame. There will be stories in the future. There's no reason Jannah shouldn't be there. And Finn, they're both at, I think, such a point in their stories where there is infinite more story to tell. And I hope that we will continue to get it in the years ahead because they're both great and interesting and valuable characters within the context of the Star Wars universe and the Resistance. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, something I've always been a fan of. One of my favorite. Oh, I'm gonna butcher it. I don't know if it's David Gamel, or Jamel. He is a British, um, primarily British fantasy author. He's passed away, but something that he did that I loved was using secondary characters in their viewpoint to establish, sort of the lore and the legend of the main characters, right? And so I can think of three chapters within the last order where I wrote from not Finn, Jannah, or Corey's POV, right? And the intention there was sort of to establish just how different these characters were, how important they were, and how monumental of a step they were taking by even approaching, thinking, and contemplating the idea of defecting from the First Order. Um, we have a Phasma chapter. We have a 12, one of um Jannah's, kind of one of her squad members, one of her subordinates. We have a chapter from 12's POV where we get to see Jannah. Um, and we have a sergeant in the First Order's POV, where we also get to see Jannah. And I think part of that is because we've had Finn, we know Finn, we've seen Finn in 3 movies, we've sort of kind of built up this idea of him, but we know very little about Jannah, and so being able to see her from these different POVs really gets us to think about how other people see her and how important the steps she was taking are, so that was a really fun writing exercise, was kind of building up the a 360 view of this character, rather than having a flat character, by giving you these other POVs to talk about them.
Yeah, and I do want to also call back to the comment you made just on stormtroopers and how they used to kind of be fodder. And I think that was like one of my things I was most excited to explore in this book was like there is a lot more behind that mask, and there are reasons, deeply personal reasons that these characters end up wanting to defect for. And we also just get so much of the more inner workings of the First Order throughout this. And Sarah, I know you had a great question on Major Goal and his role.
I okay. I love the inclusion of Major Goal a lot. I feel like he's an incredibly interesting and valuable character. So much so that when I started reading chapter 2, I was so fascinated immediately by like the first order mantras that they were saying, that I read it aloud to Brad because I was like, you need to hear this right now. It's very serious. So Major Goals Introduction offers a deeper, look at the first order, how they indoctrinate and train the young troopers through propaganda, these mantras, these morale sessions. Why was it important for you to dive into the specifics of the morale sessions and how they are created?
I mean, the easy answer is that these aren't clone troopers. They're not designed to obey. And so one of the ways that you condition someone, that you brainwash someone, is you have these repetitive tenets that they follow, that they adhere to. That's at the core. That's at the core of their belief system. It's the core of their being, right? Like they, man, I don't have a. Where's my copy of my book? Um, One of my favorite parts is, the you is dead, the I is dead. Like there's only the first order, right? And so in order to maintain control, there has to be some level of like information manipulation, you know, like fabricated news feeds, or news that is just enough tilted in the direction of, this is why the first order is important. Yes, there was an uprising, a merchant uprising. If it wasn't for the first order, who knows what chaos would now rule, you know, in the galaxy. This is why it's important for you. We have to be in lockstep. We all have to be on the same page, and it's drilled into their heads from a very, very early age. All the way through. They still have morale sessions, right? It still plays in their bunks at night when they sleep. It raises them from sleep. It helps them wake up. They listen to these mantras over and over and over. And so, the major, it's really easy to, not, I shouldn't say that. It's not easy. But you can default to having a scary, ominous villain. You can default to having a powerful villain, but someone whose superpower is they control information and feed it to you, drip, 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 just enough for you to believe what they're saying. That to me is scarier. You know what I mean? Because then his superpower is gaslighting, and that
Mm-hmm.
is terrible.
Yeah, it felt to me like, as this is a book also that's for young readers, it felt like there were a lot of lessons for young readers to take away in terms of uh, how am I thinking about the information that I'm hearing, and how can I be more thoughtful in the way that I'm living, and that's what we see through Finn and Jannah's story in this book. So I really appreciated um, the depth of character too.
I'm not gonna give a spoiler, but there's a moment where uh one of Finn's, fellow troopers asks them, hey, like, did you look inside of these things? And Finn's like, no, we were told not to, you know? And the difference between that action is what sets one trooper on one path and Finn on another path, right? And it's all about like, yes, I would love to talk with kids these days about media literacy and sources and secondary sources and verifying sources. And so that's why there's a major goal, because it is his job. Like, oh man, he's not even that dangerous. He is incredibly dangerous. He is incredibly dangerous and incredibly powerful. You're just not used to the sort of, he's using a different sort of weapon that you are not familiar with.
100%.
Hmm. Thinking of what Jannah and Finn had to go through, and the gaslighting that Major Goal had of, hey, we not only offer you a better path, but offer you a family. And then, keeping that in parallel with present day of the family that Finn and Jannah and the rest of the Resistance crew have created for themselves. I think there's still a lot of glimpses of hope in this book, and even how Koi fits into that larger found family within the Resistance. And, there are brighter days ahead for these characters. And as we start to wrap up our conversation here, I would just love to know, what do you ultimately hope readers take away from this book, considering the lessons of the past, of the present, and how we live into the future?
Star Wars is for everybody. This book was primarily aimed at teens, but it is for everyone. And I think I try to, and at least in every chapter, provide some moments of like exhale, whether it's a joke, a moment of levity, um, whether it's, Jannah seeing a flower and picking one and taking it with her. Like there's some tiny moment of joy. Um, and I think that is like, that's, that's what I want people to hold on to. Um, as today, everything that could go wrong in Kwame Mbalia's daily life has gone wrong. There are still moments where I'm like, you know what? I get to sit and talk about Star Wars for an hour, right? And people want to hear me do that. And 30 years ago, you couldn't have told me that would have been the case, right? And so in reading the book, hold your friends and family close, talk with your kids, and then just most importantly, like there is something good happened today, right? And if it hasn't happened yet, go out and find it. You still have time, and take that with you into the next day.
Get me emotional. I love that message. That's a good one. That's a good one to end on. Oh,
it's a great reminder. And so I just want to thank you for writing this book and taking the time today to talk with us among all of the things that have happened today that were unexpected. Thank you for taking the time. And before we go, and before we say goodbye to this conversation on this book, where can the listeners find you online? What can you talk about that they should be on the lookout for? And what book of yours should they read next?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, you can always, find me on my website, kwamembalia.com. I'm on Instagram entirely too much, at Mbalia1. And Blue Sky, kwamembalia.bluesky.com. I think that's the handle that it is. If you search for Kwame Mbalia, you'll see me. Up next, what do I have? I have the next in my middle grade series that comes out next year. The Jax Freeman series. That comes out fall of 2026. And what book, if you are just now reading The Last Order, what should you read next? I would say I have a sci-fi duology. Now it's for middle graders, but I had a lot of fun writing it. It's more spaceships, more quests, more adventure, a ridiculously scary, um man, is he a captain? Yeah, it's another, no, he's not a major, he's a captain. Another captain in a space army who is hunting down our main character. That's in Last Gate of the Emperor, books 1 and 2. Had a lot of fun writing that series. If you haven't read the Fortuna Favors the Bold from the Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view, that is I had a lot of fun writing that story. It was humorous. It's Bib Fortuna, who hates his job, and hates his boss and plans to kill him every day until one day something monumental happens when a space wizard appears out of the sands. So yeah, there's a lot of different directions you can go. But I would say more than anything, the next thing you should read is the next book you find interesting. I'm happy if you're just reading.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you, whether it be the library, an audiobook, like manga, comics, whatever it may be, just read. I'm right there with you.
And support your local indies. That's for sure.
Please do.
But Kwame, thank you so much once again. It was such a pleasure having you join us, and hopefully not the last time. I wish for many more Star Wars stories in your future. So thank you again. And for all of our listeners out there, You can find us on all the usual places online and on your podcast feed of your choice. So thank you, and go check out The Last Order, now out on bookshelves.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And with that being said, may the force be with you, Kwame.
And also with you. Now I disappear off I become a force ghost. Force ghost, force ghost, force ghost.